Hello, everyone. This is Devin Thorpe. I'm a Forbes contributor covering social entrepreneurship and impact investing. And we're fortunate to have with us today one of the most remarkable social entrepreneurs I've ever had the opportunity to interview. We have with us today Francis Battista, who is one of the founders of the Best Friends Animal Society, located in all places of Kanab, Utah. We'll talk more about that, I'm sure, but it is the largest companion animal sanctuary in the United States. So, Francis, thank you very much for being with us today.
Well, thank you for having me on, Devin. I'm looking forward to this.
Well, you are at least, we should describe you as a bit of a fish out of water. You've used the term misfit to describe yourself, but you were born and raised in the metropolitan New York City area, and you're now living in, really, it's not too unfair to describe the suburbs of Kanab, Utah, as the middle of nowhere.
Well, it's a stretch to call it a suburb, but we are north of the city, little town of Kanab, and it is indeed the middle of nowhere, and it's also spectacularly beautiful. I mean, if we weren't cheek by jowl with Grand Canyon and Zion National Park, we'd probably be a national park in its own right. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, spectacular area. So tell us your story of how you ended up in Kanab, Utah, after starting in New York.
Well, I was born in Manhattan. We grew up, the family was living in the Bronx at the time. It was in 1945. And a couple of years out, we moved to the suburbs. So I really grew up in little town of Mamaroneck on the Long Island Sound. A lovely, great 1950s suburban childhood. Had a wonderful time. I went to school at NYU and then also to the University of New York at Albany. And animal welfare became a significant component of my interest in my life, really, in the late 1960s. And myself and some colleagues, we started doing writing and advocacy work about anti-vivisection. So that was really our first entry into this. And then in the mid-1970s, we began doing shelter rescue as we became more acquainted with what was going on. And a group of us who had been working and at times living together in a community situation going back to the late 60s, found some property that we were able to purchase in northern Arizona. And we started really doing animal rescue in earnest there. So by the time we arrived here in Kanab, we had probably about 200 plus dogs and cats amongst the group of us. And most of those were special needs animals from shelters that we rescued from. And at the time, there were, feline leukemia amongst cats was a very common shelter ailment because it was pre-vaccine. And so a lot of the animals that we had that condition. We became very expert in nursing care. We worked with universities because we had probably the largest population, because most vets recommended people euthanize any cat that they identified as having feline leukemia. So we rather nurse them and maintain them and look after them. And that was kind of our entree into this kind of more specialized veterinary care, working closely with vets and learning in our own way how to be, great nurses for the animals. And we acquired this property here in southern Utah as we were really looking for an opportunity to create something special, a sanctuary that we could kind of, I guess, have the space to work with more animals, but also to bring people into this spectacularly beautiful, monumental landscape that, from our experience, it was a place that, personal problems just have a hard time taking hold here. You take a look up and you look at the magnificence of nature and the spectacular beauty around you, and it puts everything into perspective. So for us, we found it as a very therapeutic and healing environment, and we wanted to share that as well. At one point, one of our dogs went missing, and it wound up in the local pound, or what passed as a pound. It was just a tin roof shed in the field in back of the small municipal airport here in little town of Kanab. And we saw this was very disturbing. We said, look, anything we did would have to be better than this. So I went to the local mayor, and who was out watering his lawn with one of those little attachments on the end of a hose that sort of puts out a fan spray. And I said, Mayor Johnson, we've just acquired this property up the canyon, and we'd like to do animal control. So he looked at me and said, okay. So it was that much of a hurdle to get over. Right? I think we could have been making sausages for anybody cared, but we didn't think it could be that bad. It was this little tiny town, but within a few years, we had 1,300, soon to be 1,800 dogs and cats from the local community, and then as we became better known, people were asking us to take animals from really all over the Southwest. And at that point, we realized we had to get real. We were doing this out of pocket. We had some crazy idea to create a sanctuary and a retreat center and who knows what, and we were working off of shared inheritances and different kinds of things, but really there wasn't enough money to go around. And we knew this was going to be a story that ended very badly if we didn't act and really become a proper organization, an animal welfare organization with a fundraising component and build capacity to look after the animals that we've taken responsibility for. So it was from the late 1980s through probably about 1995, it was really hand to mouth, all hands on deck, everybody doing whatever they could. It was a 24/7 call to both learn the basics, build a mailing list, build the infrastructure of an organization, expand the growth of the sanctuary, build a membership base, and go out and meet people and fundraise and make our case. And so those of us who were the founders really started here with raw land and very little money, and a lot of folks thought we were rather crazy. Here we were a group of remnant of 60s idealists, and we didn't have any practical skills to speak of. We'd never lived and worked at high altitude here on the the Colorado Plateau. But we persevered, and over time we built what amounts to the third largest animal welfare organization in the country, and probably one of the most influential in changing the face of animal welfare and really moving this agenda of no-kill.
It is an inspiring story. You're now the largest employer in Kanab, right?
We are. We're the largest employer in Kane County. And we have approximately, well, the organization has about 600 employees overall and probably about 400 locally. Most of those are involved in animal care and organizational support. So
when you started, I think you told me that there were about 17 million pets put down every year. What kind of progress have you made in this no-kill effort over the years?
Well, back in the early 1980s, that's correct. About 17 million dogs and cats were dying in our nation's shelters. And the question wasn't being asked whether this was the right thing to do or not. The organizations that held the reins in those days were dating back decades, and their question was, what's the kindest way to do the killing, as opposed to, do we need to do the killing? And there was a fringe movement called the no-kill movement, of which we were part and significant leadership role in that. And there weren't many of us, and we had really no voice. It was a fringe movement. The only mainstream persona was Rich Avanzino, who was the head of San Francisco SPCA and did tremendous work there, and eventually made San Francisco into a no-kill city. But the advocacy for this around the country took hold like wildfire, because nobody wants to be killing animals. Nobody wants to kill dogs and cats. People want to feel that, if I, for some reason, am unfortunate enough to have my dog or cat wind up in the local shelter, or if I have to move in, or some family circumstance, I don't want to feel that I'm putting my animal to death simply because I have a family emergency. And unfortunately, that had been the case in so many communities. But now the number of animals killed in shelters annually is about 3.5 to 4 million a year, and that's about 9,000 a day, which is still a ridiculous number. Putting that in perspective, Hurricane Katrina was a terrible disaster. There were about tens of thousands of animals died, and as a result of it, Congress passed the Pets Act to facilitate the evacuation of pets. And that change in public policy saved so many lives. And by comparison, a disaster the scale of Hurricane Katrina happens virtually every week for shelter pets. So 60+ thousand animals a week are dying in our nation's shelters. And our position is that this needn't happen. We have the know-how. It's been accomplished in communities large and small around the country. And with that knowledge and that fact, we feel it's both unethical and immoral to be killing these animals, and also to be wasting taxpayers' dollars on killing these wonderful friends that have kind of been our companions from the Ice Age, to the digital age. So that's kind of where we come from on this.
Well, now what's been working and how communities like San Francisco and others have become no-kill communities. You need to tell us, some of our listeners I'm sure are big fans and they already know, but educate me and those of us who are listening that don't understand. What are the steps required to get to being a successful no-kill community?
You bet. And we like to break it down into two categories, noses in and noses out. Noses in relates to animals entering the shelter, noses out are animals leaving safely. So noses in, there are a variety of programs that address the question of how do we reduce the numbers of animals entering city shelters. The most potent and the most effective is targeted spay-neuter. That's economically targeted spay-neuter. So that's free or very low-cost spay-neuter services to provide it to people who would not otherwise be able to afford to spay or neuter their pets. And that's delivering those services to the community. So whether it's by mobile spay-neuter operations or transporting pets to spay-neuter surgeries, or having, in some states, they have the opportunity to set up pop-up type MASH units. So spay-neuter is one. Shelter prevention or shelter intervention is another, where often individuals are surrendering their pets for reasons that are easily addressed. Sometimes in poor communities, it's simply a matter of the dog keeps getting out because the fence is broken and they don't have the money to repair the fence. They don't necessarily want to lose their pet, but the dog escapes and it gets picked up, and they have this cycle and they're getting fined, and it's just something that's beyond their ability to cope with. A simple measure of providing the resource of just fixing that fence, a $50 expense with a volunteer, is something that can help that individual keep their pet. So there are a variety of shelter intervention programs that meet people and address them on their way to the shelter or to the surrender and say, look, how can we help? We also are working to eliminate or reduce some of the other streams of contributing streams of population into the shelters. So puppy mills, which are a source of animals into a community. So by addressing that, not necessarily at the puppy mill level, but more at the consumer level, at the point of purchase, educating the consumer about what they're buying in the pet store or online, and helping them make the choice for adoption. And also, one of the big factors in shelter populations are cats, and cats have about a 2% return rate to their owners, which is very sad. So encouraging people to microchip their cats, which a lot of folks don't, and also encouraging the adoption of trap, neuter, return, non-lethal management programs for community cats, so that cats that are in the community can be fixed, returned, they won't reproduce, and the populations are stabilized, and over time those populations are reduced. So those are just, there are others, but those are the primary noses in pieces. And noses out is all about marketing. It's pet adoption, and not pet adoption from the point of view of obligation or guilt, but celebration. The idea that here are these wonderful animals, and they are truly wonderful. I have had dozens and dozens of adopted animals from shelters over the years, and each one of them is so unique, and they are such wonderful personalities and interesting kind of individuals to get to know. And if anybody who has a dog or a cat, I'm sure can vouch for that. So upping the ante on pet adoption and doing, high volume adoptions and really engaging the public to be part of the solution. Because for too long, the rescue community, and there they go, some of the customers, we've been accused of being overly protective, and that, I'm sure you've heard people say that it's easier to adopt a child than it is to adopt a dog, and we need to change that, and we need to trust the public to be our partners in ending this travesty, because they are the animal lovers that are going to make the difference, but we need to engage them more, be more generous and inclusive towards them, and get them involved in the solution. So that's a big piece of it. And then various types of progressive legislation that encourages the kind of no-kill goals and productive activity that we're talking about. And something like that, for example, the city council in Austin, Texas, passed a resolution that the local shelter should achieve and maintain a 90% save rate, which is theoretically the threshold of no-kill. So those kind of city-ordained goals tend to push the organizations in the right direction. And when we talk about save them all, and that's our call to action, is save them all, we understand that there are going to be animals that are too sick or too injured or too dangerously aggressive to be adopted. And we understand that. And in those cases, then euthanasia is truly euthanasia. It's a kindness. But for the rest, and that should be minimum 90% and probably better, those animals should be placed into loving homes. And we're seeing that happening in hundreds of communities across the country.
It's really a sad commentary in a way on our history, that we were not enlightened enough to see that we were killing 14 million pets a year that didn't need to be killed. It's tragic to think that we have 3 or 4 million per year to go, but inspiring to look at that progress. And
yes, it is. And so much of the current, we're really coming out of an era that's lasted for more than 100 years, where animal control was basically a function of public health. We were dealing with, it was rabies prevention, bite prevention, and to some degree there are those kind of concerns. Public health is an issue with respect to stray animals. But over time, as vaccination and awareness has grown, the issues of rabies and that sort of thing, and dogs and cats as disease vectors, has diminished as a public concern. And humane issues have sort of entered that equation mostly from the grassroots and below, but now it's beginning to enter it from the level of public policy and above. We believe that we need to move this conversation into one where the public is driving it, because the public believes, as we do, over 70% of pet owners believe that shelter pets should only be euthanized if they're too sick to be treated or too dangerously aggressive to be adopted. So that fringe idea that we were spouting, back in the early 1980s is now a mainstream understanding. And there are 71 million pet owners in the United States, 71 million households, that have pets. So it's a significant component, a significant interest group. And by harnessing people's love for their pets, and it's no exaggeration to say that people feel that pets are part of their family. That is what's helping to propel this movement, because it's not something that's being pushed by a group of activists or advocates that are coming at it from the side. This is a mainstream issue, and the public wants to see this happen.
I want to take just a minute before we wrap up, Francis, if you'll indulge me, and ask you to go back in your mind and identify for us your deepest why. I want to understand why this was important enough to you 20 years ago, 30 years ago, whenever it was that you really started in this, that you've devoted your life to this.
Well, I think I and my colleagues firmly believe that the lives of these animals have intrinsic value, that they're not trash or garbage, and that it's a reflection of our relationship to the rest of the planet and the rest of the world. Kindness and compassion, whether it's towards individuals or animals or trees on the planet, whatever. It doesn't have a starting point and an ending point. It's not something that begins here and ends there. Compassion is a continuum, and it's inclusive, and it's generous, and it's supportive, and it's life-giving. And so that's our sort of philosophical underpinnings. But for me, I suppose it was just growing up with pets, understanding the relationship, having very close understanding and appreciation of what these animals have, and understand how they feel and understand their sense of attachment, their sense of loss, their sense of belonging, of love, of all the things we know scientifically it's been demonstrated that our pets have these very complex social lives, and they experience love and loss and anxiety and all the things that we do. And the idea of putting these animals through that type of stress and anxiety and pain and then killing them seems such a huge injustice. So that's sort of where the motivation comes from.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. You're really an inspiration to millions of people, and certainly there are millions of pets that owe you a debt of gratitude, and you'll probably never get a thank you note, but it's nonetheless appreciated. So
I get plenty of wags and licks, so we're pretty good on that.
Oh, good. Good. Well, before we go, can you tell us a little bit about how people can engage with you if they're interested in helping?
Absolutely. We have Best Friends Animal Society. Our website is bestfriends.org. We have city programs in Los Angeles and Salt Lake. We are working with shelters and cities for programs in Albuquerque and San Antonio and Baltimore. We work closely with folks in Jacksonville. We have also in Atlanta. We're working in the New York area and have work going on in New York City. But if people would like to get involved and get engaged, bestfriends.org. There's a variety of opportunities, and we have over 800 partners of our No More Homeless Pets network around the country, or local organizations that are committed to the same goals that we help and support through fundraising opportunities and our expertise and training and various other things that we have to offer. So there are a lot of ways to get involved as a volunteer or as an organization, and we welcome everyone.
Well, and I want to point out one other way that people can engage with you. You'll be speaking at the Social Enterprise and Crowdfunding Conference on September 26th at Snowbird that I'm organizing. I'm grateful to you for coming to that, but it'll be a great opportunity for people who are interested in learning more about what you're doing to meet you in person and find a way to get involved. Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. And that's on September 26th, I believe. Is that correct? Yep, September 26th at Snowbird here in Utah. So, exciting. Francis, I thank you very much for your time today. Really, it's been great to have you. Devin, thank you very much. All righty, let's do some good.